Imagine that one day we discover something new and suddenly everyone wants to use it. Something similar happened with X-rays and radioactivity. One day you discover this invisible force that can see through things, and the next, people are adding it to beauty creams, chocolates, cigarettes, water, and even suppositories. Yes, you heard right. But what was going through people's heads to think that this was a good idea? And it didn't stop there. Doctors, those with more noble intentions, started using X-rays to spy on what was going on inside our bodies. But the irony is that a few weeks later, people started to notice their hair falling out. Strange, right? At the time, the big problem was that nobody really knew how much radiation was too much. We were just beginning to explore this new frontier of science and medicine, trying to understand its limits. But what makes radiation dangerous, anyway? When it is absorbed by our bodies, it can wreak real havoc. In the beginning, of course, it seemed that the benefits outweighed the risks. Radiation helped diagnose diseases, treat cancers, and even helped understand the age of ancient objects. But, as with any discovery, the risks began to become clearer over time. This shows us how curious human beings are, always looking for innovation. But it also reminds us of the importance of respecting limits and understanding the consequences. Today, with all the technological advances, we use X-rays and radiation much more safely. But have you ever stopped to think about what we're still discovering today that, in the future, we might look back on and ask, what were we thinking? How do you think today's discoveries will be viewed in the future? Are we being careful enough? Have you ever wondered why something we can't see, taste, smell, or hear, like ionizing radiation, can be so dangerous? Yes, that same radiation that you can't even touch or feel. Why does it have the power to cause so much harm? Well, just give me a few seconds, and I promise you'll be glued to this story until the end. Radiation is basically energy in motion. It can be in the form of tiny particles, such as protons, neutrons, and electrons, or as electromagnetic waves. Yes, I'm talking about those things that make your microwave work, the light that brightens our days, and also X-rays. But it's not all radiation that you need to fear, okay? There is a specific type, ionizing radiation, and here's some friendly advice. Avoiding supernovas or having the bright idea of licking enriched uranium from a nuclear power plant is a good idea. I know, it sounds obvious, but there's always someone, right? So what's the moral of our story? That ionizing radiation, although invisible, has incredible power, capable of altering the very building blocks of life. Fascinating, but also a little frightening. It makes us wonder, what else is out there, invisible to our eyes, but so impactful on our lives? The universe is not a fan of instability. When something is unstable, like a radioactive nucleus, it does everything it can to return to equilibrium. And how does it do this? By emitting particles in a desperate attempt to calm itself down. These stabilization missions can be of three types: alpha, beta, and gamma. The alpha particle, basically a helium nucleus without the electrons, is so dramatic that a simple sheet of paper can stop it. The beta particle, a mere electron, takes a little more effort to stop, like a layer of wood. And gamma radiation? That's the real villain of the story, needing concrete or lead to block it. Now, you might be asking yourself, but why is this business of pulling out electrons so problematic? Here's the drama. Ripping off an electron may seem like nothing, but it's like someone messing up a meticulously constructed house of cards. This simple act can break chemical bonds, turning well-structured molecules into unruly fragments. These fragments then start to connect where they shouldn't, even in our DNA. And that's when the story takes a dark turn. But calm down. Before you start eyeing every wallpaper with suspicion or putting on a lead vest to open the fridge, remember, understanding these invisible forces gives us the power to protect ourselves. Radiation can damage our DNA in two ways, directly and indirectly. Directly, it's like a bull in a china store, directly attacking our genetic material and breaking the chemical bonds. In the indirect form, it acts more like a puppet master, manipulating the surrounding water to create unstable reactants, which then cause chaos. But here's a curious fact. Our DNA is more like a superhero than you might think. It has its own repair mechanisms, trying to fix the damage done. The tricky part is when the damage is so great that even the superhero DNA can't cope. And then, my friends, things can get really ugly. Now, imagine that around 33% of these attacks are direct, and the rest? Well, it comes from those free radicals, creating a real mess. But calm down, most of the serious effects of radiation happen at very high doses, the kind you don't find by having your chest X-rayed. Speaking of X-rays, did you know that the Chernobyl firefighters suffered serious tissue effects? This happens when a large number of cells in a tissue die, which can lead to things like skin burns and serious inflammation. These cases are extreme and linked to accidents or specific treatments such as radiotherapy, where the idea is to actually kill cells. The truth is that our body is an incredibly resilient and adaptable machine. Tissue effects only become a problem if the radiation dose exceeds a certain limit, and the most serious effects, such as the dreaded acute radiation syndrome, only occur in extreme exposures. So, that chest X-ray? Relax, you're safe. Imagine measuring something invisible, something you can't pick up or see, like radiation. And for that, we use a unit called Gray, abbreviated as GY. Now, to make this more tangible, I'm going to use a rather unusual comparison: bananas. That's right, bananas. Pay attention, because this is going to get serious, but also a bit funny. If you receive a radiation dose of around 1 Gray, it's as if you'd eaten 10 million bananas or had 50,000 chest X-rays. And what happens? Well, apart from probably never wanting to see bananas again in your life, you could get nausea, diarrhea, and a massive drop in your blood system. Now, if things get more intense, say between 1 and 3 Grays, we're talking 30 million bananas or 150,000 chest X-rays, get ready for serious infections. And it doesn't stop there. With 3 to 5 Grays, as well as losing your appetite for bananas forever, you can face bleeding, hair loss, and, believe it or not, sterility. That's right, 0 children and 0 hair for consuming 50 million bananas or undergoing 250,000 chest X-rays. But what if we go to the extreme? 10 Grays of radiation, something like devouring 100 million bananas or having 500,000 chest X-rays, and you'll be dealing with inflammation of the lungs, severe damage to the nervous and cardiovascular systems, and, well, things can get pretty grim, leading to a not-so-happy ending within a few days. Now, to put it all into perspective, the generally lethal dose of ionizing radiation is around 5 Grays. Some of the workers at Chernobyl received that dose in less than a minute. And to think that all this amounts to half the lethal dose, it makes you rethink the value of a simple banana, doesn't it? Let's enter a world that seems straight out of a science fiction script, but is pure reality. The long-term impact of ionizing radiation. Imagine this: small but powerful invisible forces capable of altering the very code of life, our DNA. The so-called stochastic effects of radiation are essentially Russian roulette at the cellular level. They have no minimum threshold for happening. Even a low dose can trigger changes, although, of course, the higher the dose, the greater the risk. Sounds unfair, right? A single moment can change everything, leading to mutations that, over time, can result in cancer. Now, just imagine, the human body, this incredibly complex machine, is prepared to deal with mutations here and there. But for the alarm to sound, many cells have to join the mutation dance. And here's a curious detail. Leukemia, for example, can take around 8 years after exposure to radiation to show up, while solid tumors can hide for decades. And if you think that's enough to worry about, there's more. Children with their growing bodies and cells dividing by the 1,000 are practically radiation sponges compared to adults. Oh, and there are also hereditary effects. Yes, some mutations can be passed on to your descendants. So technically, you could pass on a mutation due to radiation to your children or grandchildren. After the discovery of X-rays and radioactivity, Scientists and doctors marveled at the ability to see inside the human body without needing a scalpel. But, as with every good story, there was a catch. Over time, stories began to accumulate about scientists and workers exposed to radiation who developed serious problems long after the initial exposure. But how do you study something that takes years, even decades, to show its true colors? Among the heroes of this journey are the survivors of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the populations around Chernobyl. Thanks to them, we have been able to understand much of what we know today about the long-term effects of radiation. Did you know that, despite all these studies, the relationship between radiation exposure and cancer is not a straight line? It's more like trying to predict the weather. We know the conditions, but there's always an element of uncertainty. And as for hereditary effects, radiation in humans seems to be less harmful than we thought, without passing on its bad effects to the next generations, unlike what happens with plants and animals. This raises the question, are we humans more resistant? Or have we simply not lived long enough to notice these effects? But here comes the twist in our tale. What if I told you that radiation is also a hero? That's right. In medicine, it works real miracles. From eliminating tumors to helping diagnose diseases, radiation has saved lives all over the world. Just imagine, that energy that once caused so much fear is now an essential part of treatments and exams, proving that its power, when used wisely and responsibly, brings far more benefits than risks. So did I surprise you? The story of radiation is a reminder that knowledge is a powerful tool, and it's up to us to decide how we use it. So, how about we share more stories like this, exploring the bright side of discoveries that we often only know through their dark moments? Thank you very much for embarking on this journey with me, and see you next time.